While we often hear about enlightened nobles and their contributions to the arts and sciences, there's a hidden side to this narrative: the lives of the serfs who supported the aristocrats' opulent lifestyles. Join us as we explore how serfs lived and the roles of their owners in a system that can be likened to a form of slavery. This journey begins with the Cathedral Code of 1649, which formalized serfdom, granting the nobility landowners unprecedented power over the peasants. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Stay tuned as we uncover this intriguing chapter in history. In Russia, landlords regarded serfs as their personal property, giving them the liberty to exercise complete authority over them, including the power to end their lives. Instances of wrongdoing committed by these landlords were frequent, and the consequences for such transgressions were relatively mild and primarily symbolic. If male serfs could somehow manage to exist in relative safety even in the court of a cruel ruling landlord, girls and women had to endure not only moral and physical harm but also outright violence. Serfs were indeed a valuable commodity, intended either for sailors for the purpose of exchange or, from time to time, as an expensive gift. Young girls became, in fact, a highly prized asset for the owners because rich and noble landlords, and even the nobility, placed great value on young Russian beauties and sometimes presented them to merchants from the Caucasus region. There is documented evidence of this practice in the publication, Russian Antiquity, where a priest from Suwalska province, now part of Poland and Lithuania, recounted a story of a lady who selected around 30 young boys and girls, gathered them, and transported them to the Arabinsk fair for sale, with Armenians being among the primary buyers. Other landlords not only sold their serfs but also subjected them to truly hellish living conditions. For instance, the infamous and ruthless Bloody Barini Darya Nikolaevna Saltykova or Saltychika imposed her own punishments for work she deemed sloppy, or simply when she was in a bad mood. There are numerous accounts of Saltychika beating her maids for not scrubbing the floor well enough, striking them on the head, and even burning the girl's hair. The most barbaric incident involves the story of a serf woman who was beaten to death on Saltychika's orders. When this unfortunate woman was taken to the temple, Saltychika ordered to place her infant child on top of her, and tragically, the child froze to death on the way. Another merciless landlady was Alexandra Kozlovskaya, renowned for treating her serfs even worse than the cruelest soldiers in concentration camps. She forced girls to strip naked, subjected them to floggings, and engaged in further torture by making them lay their breasts on a marble table after servants had whipped them. Kozlovskaya personally participated in these torturous acts, continuing until the girls' bodies were utterly mutilated. The perverse behaviors of landlords like Nikolai Struisky, Lev Izmailov, and Viktor Straczynski have been documented as well. Penza landowner Nikolai Struisky went unpunished, although his amusements could eclipse even Saltykova's. In the basement of his house, he assembled a collection of various instruments of torture and tested them on his peasants. There was also a special area adapted as a shooting gallery. Victims would run there from wall to wall and quack, and Struisky would shoot. On his account, more than 200 killed. However, in some cases, they even appeared almost angelic when compared to other tyrannical landlords. They had girls and young women whose fate was to exist as sex slaves. By the way, most self-respecting nobles and landlords considered it a rule of etiquette to maintain a harem of unfortunate women and girls. Even if the harem was small, the girls were chosen according to the preferences of the master. Of course, no consent was sought from the parents, and permission was not asked from the unfortunate women. Other landlords, to satisfy their sexual impulses simply by force of power and seeing no limits, used even minors. Landlords also sought entertainment in other ways, and it happened like this: when serfs returned from work, a messenger would arrive at their house and simply take the woman or girl to the landlord's house. Then, of course, the unfortunate woman returned home. Often, such women were already legally married, and it is impossible to imagine what their husbands experienced during this time. Nevertheless, many historians believe that many unrestrained peasant uprisings were often provoked by such misconduct on the part of landlords. In the courts of some landlords, there was a clear record of girls being born, and when they grew to a certain age, they were taken away for sexual pleasures. In an attempt to understand the nature of landlords, history has preserved stories of other tyrants characterized by insane sexual perversions and attitudes towards unfortunate slave girls and women. For instance, Prince Gagarin maintained a relatively modest harem of 7 girls and 2 gypsies, requiring the girls to sing lively songs and dance like gypsies. The latter group was tasked with imparting life skills to these girls, and any misconduct resulted in severe punishments, including restrictions on looking out of windows. No less famous was Prince Nikolai Yusupov, one of the richest men in the Russian Empire, renowned as a consummate landowner. He even hired a special choreographer from Europe to teach the harem concubines proper movement and the basics of theater, all to satisfy his desires. Yusupov's most notorious form of entertainment was a theatrical performance. Upon a signal from Yusupov himself, the girls would discard all their clothes and perform in their pristine condition in front of the lustful landlord. What occurred afterward is not even worth describing. Additionally, at Prince Nikolai Yusupov's estate, a special labyrinth was constructed in the garden where concubines, disguised as angels, were compelled to entertain wayward men. The extent to which serfs were devalued is evident in the story published by Boris Tarasov, a guardsman who, upon retiring, sold all the men on his estate and said to his astonished neighbors the following: "As you all know, I sold the men of my village, and now there are only women and beautiful girls left. I'm only 25 years old, and I'm very strong. I'm going to settle my land. In 10 years, I'll be the true master of several hundred serfs. And in 15 years, I'll put them up for sale. No horse breeding will yield such a precise and reliable profit in the long run." European customs were also practiced in Russia. For example, the so-called right of the first night, when a landowner could intrude on a wedding and claim the bride. The most disgusting example of this is the behavior of the landlord in the village of Smykovo. When the bride's parents refused to give him their daughter for the first night, the landlord ordered the girl to be brought to him together with her parents. Then, he commanded to restrain the parents with chains, and the landlord sexually assaulted the hapless daughter before them. There were also cases when some landlords, even after losing their manhood, could not get rid of their perverted habits. The landowner Kashkarov was famous for having 15 girls in his harem. Despite the fact that he could no longer engage in coitus with the girls, he still insisted on being surrounded by naked concubines for the night. One of them read him fairy tales. The unfortunate ones also accompanied the old landlord to the baths. If any of the girls suddenly refused to undress, she would be brutally flogged by the infuriated landlord.